Holy Gospel according to Luke. The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and make your place at the table'? Would you not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me. Put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink. Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank the slave for doing what he was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" Gospel of the Lord. Well, we actually talked about this one 3 years ago. I don't expect you to remember it, but I want to take this opportunity to go back to the reading from the Hebrew Bible, our first reading today. It was Habakkuk chapter 1, the first 4 verses, then followed by chapter 2, the first 4 verses. It reads, "The oracle that the prophet Habakkuk saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack, and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous. Therefore judgment comes forth perverted. I will stand at my watch post and station myself on the rampart. I will keep close watch to see what he will say to me and what he will answer concerning my complaint." Then the Lord answered me and said, "Write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them. But the righteous live by their faithfulness." Boy, that last line. But the righteous live by their faithfulness. It's been interpreted, the just shall live by faith. The righteous live by their faithfulness, not their belief, not having right belief, but their faithfulness. That's a phrase that we lose so many times. When Paul talks about having the faith of Christ and that we are saved by faith in Christ, doesn't read that. It talks about the faith of Christ. And more to the point, it talks about the faithfulness of Christ. That's what rescues us, Christ's faithfulness. That line gets repeated by Paul in Galatians and Romans and elsewhere, repeated by the author of Hebrews. It becomes the slogan of the Reformation. But let's look back. In this time when Habakkuk was writing, the date is the late 7th, early 6th century, during the decline of the Assyrian Empire, the rise of Babylonian dominance. Not the old Babylonians like we know about Hammurabi and his code and all like that. These were, historians call them the Neo-Babylonians. Habakkuk calls them the Chaldeans. Now, the Chaldeans had lived in the Babylonian Empire, and they were kind of a nomadic people and actually came from like some of the southern swamps. They overthrew Babylon, took the city, and created their own short-lived empire. Habakkuk is in this tumultuous period that surrounded King Jehoiakim's reign. And Jehoiakim reigns from 609 to 598 BCE. It's a time that was marked with political instability, social injustice, to be sure. looming exile. Nebuchadnezzar was coming. Judah, the southern kingdom, was caught between these imperial powers, between Egypt to the southwest and Babylon to the east and north. Jehoiakim had been installed by the Pharaoh of Egypt. He was a puppet king. He had abandoned Josiah's reforms. He had ruled with corruption, with violence. And so he prompts these prophetic denunciations. Think about Jeremiah chapter 22. Habakkuk's not like other prophets, these other prophets who speak to the people. Habakkuk engages in direct dialogue with God. It's a unique format. There's complaint, response, and then a vision. It frames the book as kind of a theological wrestling match rather than a public sermon. The form that we see here is lament and complaint. The prophet uses the phrase, how long, ad anah, to signal a formal lament, kind of like some of the Psalms that were protesting. Habakkuk accuses God of ignoring the cries for help, failing to intervene against rampant violence. He says, destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. It's verse 3. The Torah has been paralyzed and justice is perverted. Remember, we had read the text last week, I think it was, in Amos, who talked about the unjust practices in the marketplace of false balances, so you could cheat the poor. Habakkuk doesn't question God's existence. He's questioning God's justice. Kind of a radical theological move, holding God accountable for what Habakkuk would call moral failure. Think about the trial that took place in the concentration camp at Auschwitz, when the tribunal of rabbis put God on trial for abandoning the Jewish people. The end note of that is that they pronounced God guilty. And then they concluded with, and now it's time for prayers. Marvelous. We go on to chapter 2, the first 4 verses, and this genre is now a report of a vision and the divine response to to Habakkuk's complaints. Habakkuk stations himself like a watchman, waiting for God's reply. Going to take my post and I'm going to wait until he answers me. It's at the same time defiance and hope. How does God respond? Write this vision. This instruction to inscribe the vision, it just says this is going to be an enduring promise. Make it so everybody can read it. Make it so somebody running can look at it and read it. And it's going to be accessible to everybody. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. This introduction of eschatological, waiting for the end times, patience. Wait. Your complaint's going to be answered. Now, when we look at the intervening verses, which I wish our text would have included, and if I had, it would have taken way too long. But he goes, so you're tired of the Assyrians. Okay, I'm going to send the Chaldeans that hasty people. These guys are violent. You thought the Assyrians were bad? Wait for these guys. Which is kind of a message to us of we got to be careful what we ask for. Sometimes it seems like the cure is worse than the disease. And sure enough, here come the Chaldeans under Nebuchadnezzar, and they destroy Jerusalem and they take the people into exile. He talks about the proud. Their spirit is not right within them. How many times does the scripture talk about pride and arrogance? A haughty spirit comes before what? A fall. Pride goes before destruction. But the righteous, he says in verse 4, they will live by their faithfulness. That cornerstone of Pauline theology and the foundation of Reformation doctrine. When Luther read that, I won't tell you where he said he was reading it. He said that it just struck him. And he realized not only does it say it in Galatians, which I think is what he was reading, but it says it in Paul. It says it in Hebrews. It says it in Habakkuk, in both testaments, in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament, said strikingly like this. There's some significance to all this, the proud versus the righteous. It's faith versus what the Greeks would call hubris, tragic pride. And Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4 contrasts this arrogant self-reliance against the humble trust in God. And that will resonate across Jewish and Christian traditions forever. What happens to the proud? What happens to those people so racked with hubris? And look what happens to those of faith. Paul cites Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4, what we were just reading, in Romans chapter 1, verse 17, and again in Galatians in 3:11, to argue that righteousness comes through faith, not works. Again, a central Reformation theme. But we always have to be careful of excluding works. I don't do works to gain my salvation. I do works because of my salvation. I can't do anything else. There's nothing I can do to save myself, nothing I can add to the work of Christ. But I can give praise to God, and I can show my justification through doing good for others. Habakkuk dares to put God on trial, to question divine justice, making space for a lament as also an act of faith, which challenges the triumphalist readings of prophecy and talks about protest is spiritually legitimate. It's okay to stand before God and question. You may never get an answer, at least not when you want it, but it's okay. Habakkuk's protest isn't abstract. It comes from a real sense of political oppression and theological disorientation. What's happening here? Why is the Torah void, it seems? Why is justice perverted? And the prophet's voice echoes the cries of all those who suffer under unjust regimes. Doesn't matter who. Doesn't matter if it's the Assyrians, Babylonians, the Romans, the Nazis. Doesn't matter. It echoes. That's the beauty of the scriptures for me. It still talks about what we go through. And Habakkuk's lament can be read as a early form of liberation theology, which we really didn't see arise until the 60s and 70s. That is to say, 1960s and 70s, where divine justice is demanded in the face of systemic oppression and violence. And we have this raw emotional honesty, this refusal to accept God's silence. And all of that kind of dovetails into what we now call feminist theology that values embodied, rational, confrontational spirituality. Think about Martha. She confronted Jesus. If you had been here, my brother need not have died. Her sister Mary kind of reiterates those words too. And what happens? Jesus reveals himself. I am the truth and the life. The liberation theologists or theologians would call this protest as prophetic faith, a voice from the margins, one who dares to confront divine silence in the face of this crushing systemic oppression. Habakkuk says, why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Becomes a rallying cry for the oppressed communities that just want divine accountability. How does God respond? Well, like we said, the assurance that division awaits its time tells us that justice may be delayed, but it is not denied. And that resonates in the movements that call for racial, economic, political liberation. And the righteous shall live by their faithfulness isn't just passive belief, like I said. It's active trust in the face of empire. The great theologians Gustavo Gutierrez and James Cone, they interpret this as a call to live faithfully, even in the middle of injustice, not to retreat into spiritual quietism, not to disappear from the world, not to refuse to take part in the world, but live faithfully, even in the middle of injustice. Modern feminist theologians emphasize Habakkuk's emotional honesty and the stance of dialogue with God as a model for rational spirituality. Habakkuk doesn't suppress his anguish. His lament is a sacred act of telling the truth, like the Psalms of Lament that are overlooked so many times in our patriarchal liturgical traditions. Look how Habakkuk's language, violence, strife, contention, they echo the lived experience of women. I'm sorry. Who've lived under patriarchy, lived in war, lived in poverty. But the image of the prophet on the watchtower brings this image of the vigilance of women who guard their communities, who bear witness to suffering, but who refuse to be silenced. Habakkuk, pardon me. I thought I was going to make it. Is this threshold prophet standing between despair and vision? He embodies the wonderful seer who suffers injustice, but dares to look beyond it. Imagine, goodness gracious, I would love to think of a discussion group. I'd like to lead it in the next life. When you have Habakkuk, Jeremiah, Dolores Huerta, Desmond Tutu, all of them exploring prophetic hope and what it means in the face of crushing violence. We have to be those voices of hope, no matter what happens in our country, no matter no matter no matter what oppression we see, no matter what injustice we see. I think Habakkuk would say that the only sin is to keep quiet. Thanks be to God.